You have an extra $1,000 sitting in your bank account right now. It's not enough to change your life overnight, but it's enough to force a decision that could quietly shape your financial future for years. You could use it to pay off your debt faster, which would feel responsible, disciplined, and safe. Or you could invest it, put it into the market, and let it grow into something much larger over time. Both options sound smart, and both are commonly recommended by financial experts. But here's the uncomfortable truth. One of these choices could silently cost you tens of thousands of dollars over the long run, and most people don't even realize they're making the wrong decision because they're not thinking in terms of long-term math. They're reacting based on emotion, fear, and the need to feel secure in the present moment. Most financial decisions don't feel like big decisions when you make them. They feel small, harmless, and even logical. But the reality is that money compounds over time, and small decisions today can create massive differences in outcomes years later. The difference between paying off debt early and investing consistently is not just about numbers, it's about how you understand risk, time, and opportunity. And if you get this wrong, you won't notice immediately. You'll notice it 10 or 20 years later, when you realize how much money you could have had if you had made a slightly different decision. My name is Jack, and on this channel, we break down the hidden rules of money, psychology, and wealth that most people never understand. If you want to make smarter financial decisions and avoid costly mistakes, make sure you subscribe. Dave Ramsey versus the real math. If you've ever looked for financial advice online, you've probably come across Dave Ramsey, one of the most influential voices in personal finance. His message is simple, direct, and emotionally powerful. Pay off your debt as fast as possible, avoid it at all costs, and live a life free from financial obligations. His philosophy is built around behavior, not just numbers. He understands that for most people, debt is not just a financial problem, it's a psychological burden. It creates stress, anxiety, and a feeling of being trapped. From that perspective, his advice makes perfect sense because eliminating debt gives people a sense of control and peace. However, while Dave Ramsey's approach works extremely well for people who struggle with discipline or have high-interest debt, it doesn't always align with mathematical optimization. The financial world is not just about eliminating risk, it's also about maximizing opportunity, and sometimes the mathematically optimal decision is not the one that feels the safest. This is where the debate becomes interesting, because you are forced to choose between emotional comfort and long-term financial efficiency. One path reduces stress immediately, while the other builds wealth gradually, often without immediate visible rewards. A decision that looks simple. Let's bring this down to a real-life scenario that millions of people face every single day. Imagine you are in your late 20s, you have a stable job, and you're trying to be responsible with your money. You've managed to save a small emergency fund, but you still have $10,000 in debt, perhaps from student loans, a car payment, or a personal loan. The interest rate on that debt is around 5%, which is relatively low compared to credit cards, but still something you want to get rid of eventually. Every month you make your minimum payments, and you slowly watch the balance go down. Now one day, something unexpected happens. You receive a bonus at work, or maybe a tax refund, and suddenly you have an extra $1,000. It's not life-changing money, but it's enough to accelerate your progress if used wisely. Now you're standing at a crossroads. One option is to take that $1,000 and put it directly toward your debt, reducing your balance and saving on future interest. The other option is to invest that money into the stock market, where it has the potential to grow over time. At first glance, paying off debt feels like the responsible and obvious choice. It's what most people would do without thinking twice. But this is exactly where the mistake often happens, because the obvious choice is not always the optimal one. The difference between 5% and 8%. Let's take a step back and actually look at the numbers, because this is where clarity begins. Your debt is costing you 5% annually. That means for every $1,000 you owe, you are effectively losing $50 per year in interest. Now, let's compare that to investing. Historically, the stock market has returned around 8% to 10% per year over long periods of time. This doesn't mean you will earn that every single year, but over decades, that has been the average range. Now imagine you take that $1,000 and invest it instead of using it to pay off your debt. Instead of saving 5%, you could potentially earn 8%. That creates a 3% difference in your favor. At first, that difference doesn't seem significant. It's just $30 per year on $1,000. But the key factor here is not the percentage itself. It's what happens when that difference compounds over time. Compounding is the process where your returns start generating their own returns. And over long periods, this creates exponential growth. If you invest that $1,000 and leave it untouched for 30 years at an average return of 8%, it doesn't just grow to $1,300 or $1,500. It grows to over $10,000. That's the power of compounding. Now compare that to paying off debt early, where the benefit is linear and limited. You save some interest, but once the debt is gone, the growth stops. Investing, on the other hand, continues to grow indefinitely, which is why time plays such a crucial role in this decision, why people choose the wrong option. Even after understanding the math, most people still choose to pay off their debt first. This is not because they are bad at numbers, but because human beings are not naturally wired to make purely logical financial decisions. We are emotional creatures, and our brains are designed to prioritize safety, certainty, and immediate relief over long-term optimization. Debt represents a constant psychological pressure. Every time you see your balance, every time you make a payment, you are reminded that you owe something. That feeling creates discomfort, and the natural human response to discomfort is to eliminate it as quickly as possible. Paying off debt provides instant emotional relief. It feels like progress. It feels like control. It gives you a sense of accomplishment that investing does not provide in the short term. Investing, on the other hand, feels uncertain and abstract. When you invest money, you don't immediately see the benefits. In fact, sometimes the value goes down before it goes up. This creates anxiety and doubt, which discourages people from sticking with it long enough to see the long-term results. This is why Dave Ramsey's advice works so well for a large percentage of people. It simplifies the decision-making process and aligns with human psychology. Instead of asking people to think in terms of percentages and compounding, it tells them to eliminate debt and reduce stress. And for someone who struggles with discipline, this approach can be life-changing. However, for someone who is disciplined and capable of managing both debt and investments simultaneously, this approach may not be the most efficient path to building wealth. The hidden cost. One of the most important concepts in this entire discussion is opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the value of what you give up when you choose one option over another. When you use your extra money to pay off low-interest debt instead of investing, the opportunity cost is the potential growth that money could have generated over time. This cost is invisible in the short term, which is why most people ignore it. When you pay off debt, you see a clear and immediate benefit. Your balance goes down, your interest payments decrease, and you feel more in control. But when you choose not to invest, you don't see what you lost. There is no notification telling you how much money you could have had in the future. That loss only becomes visible years later when you compare your financial situation to what it could have been. For example, if you consistently choose to pay off low-interest debt instead of investing during your 20s and early 30s, you are effectively delaying the most powerful period of compounding in your life. The earlier you invest, the more time your money has to grow. Missing those early years can have a massive impact on your long-term wealth, even if you start investing later with larger amounts. Modern examples. How this plays out in real life. This situation is not theoretical. It happens every single day in modern life. Consider someone with student loans at a 4% interest rate. Instead of investing in the stock market during their 20s, they focus entirely on becoming debt-free. By the time they finally pay off their loans in their mid-30s, they feel proud and relieved. But at the same time, they have missed out on 10 to 15 years of compound growth, which could have significantly increased their net worth. Another example is someone with a low-interest mortgage. Instead of investing extra cash into the market, they aggressively pay down their mortgage early. While this reduces their debt, it also ties up their money in an illiquid asset that does not generate the same level of returns as other investments. In contrast, someone who invests consistently while maintaining manageable debt may end up with a much higher net worth over time, even if they still carry some debt. These examples highlight a key idea: being debt-free is not the same as being wealthy. You can have zero debt and still struggle financially if you have not built assets that generate income and grow over time. When paying debt makes sense. At this point, it's important to recognize that this is not a black and white situation. Dave Ramsey's advice is absolutely correct in certain scenarios. If you have high-interest debt, such as credit cards with interest rates of 15% or 20%, then paying it off should be your top priority. No investment can reliably outperform that level of guaranteed loss. In this case, eliminating debt is not just a psychological win, it is also a mathematically sound decision. However, when it comes to low-interest debt, the situation changes. Debt with interest rates between 2% and 5% is relatively cheap, especially in an environment where investment returns can exceed that rate over time. In these cases, focusing exclusively on debt repayment may not be the most efficient use of your money. Instead, a balanced approach that includes both investing and gradual debt repayment can produce better long-term results. The key is to understand the difference between bad debt and manageable debt. High-interest consumer debt is dangerous and should be eliminated quickly. Low-interest debt, on the other hand, can be managed strategically while you focus on growing your wealth. How smart people make this decision. So how do you actually decide what to do in your own situation? The answer is to use a simple decision-making framework that combines both math and psychology. First, identify the interest rate of your debt. If it is high, prioritize paying it off immediately. If it is low, consider investing while continuing to make regular payments on your debt. Second, evaluate your financial discipline. If you are the type of person who might overspend or struggle to stay consistent with investing, then focusing on debt repayment may be the safer option. However, if you are disciplined and committed to long-term investing, then allowing your money to grow while managing low-interest debt can significantly increase your wealth over time. Third, consider your emotional tolerance. Financial decisions are not just about numbers, they are also about peace of mind. If carrying debt causes you significant stress, then paying it off may be worth it, even if the math suggests a different approach. On the other hand, if you are comfortable with manageable debt and focused on long-term growth, then investing may be the better choice. At the end of the day, this decision is not really about choosing between paying off debt or investing. It's about understanding how money actually works and how small decisions compound into big outcomes over time. Most people focus on short-term relief because it feels good, but wealth is not built on feelings. It is built on patience, consistency, and the ability to think long-term even when it feels uncomfortable. When you choose to pay off low-interest debt instead of investing, you are not necessarily making a wrong decision, but you might be choosing a slower path to wealth without realizing it. On the other hand, when you invest while managing your debt, you are allowing time and compounding to work in your favor, and time is the single most powerful asset you have. Once it's gone, you can't get it back. The people who build real wealth are not the ones who simply avoid debt or chase quick returns. They are the ones who understand balance. They know when to eliminate risk and when to take advantage of opportunity. They are comfortable making decisions that may not feel immediately rewarding, but create massive results over time. This is why the real goal is not just to be debt-free. Being debt-free can give you peace, but it does not automatically make you wealthy. Wealth comes from owning assets that grow, produce income, and compound over time. If you focus only on eliminating debt without building assets, you may find yourself financially stable, but not financially free. So, the next time you have extra money and face this decision, don't just ask yourself what feels right. Ask yourself what makes sense in the long run. Look at the numbers, understand the trade-offs, and make a decision that aligns with both your financial goals and your personal comfort. Because in the end, it's not about choosing between debt and investing. It's about choosing a strategy that allows your money to work for you instead of against you.